You all could please rise in body or spirit, and we will sing hymn number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are, to gather together. How many of you have sung this? All of you, right? So we're going to sing it through once, and then we're going to do it as a round, because why not? It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. We got it? Here we go. All together, one time through. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is the world and of this fair. Come, yet again, come, one.
You'll please join me for the chalice lighting that Claire's going to do in just a second. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind. This is the church of the helping hands. This is the church of the loving heart. Together, we care for the church and each other. Well, good morning and welcome to the combined service of St. John's Unitarian Universalist Church and First Unitarian Church. My name is John Kachuba. I'm a member of St. John's and I'm one of 3 worship associates this morning, along with Claire Wagner from St. John's and Don Sherman from First Unitarian. All 3 of us serve on St. John's Sanctuary and Immigration team. Our Unitarian Universalist congregations honor and value the racial, economic, cultural, age, physical ability, sexual orientation, and gender diversity of our members and visitors. You are all welcome here. We also extend a special welcome to this morning's guests and visitors who are new to this country, no matter the circumstances that have brought you here. After the service, please join us for a reception in the fellowship hall across the lobby. And a quick reminder to please turn off all and silence cell phones and other noisy electronic devices. Again, welcome to all here this morning. We are pleased that you've chosen to celebrate and worship with us.
We'll now sing hymn number 134. Please rise in body or spirit. Our world is one world.
The rains that fall Good morning. Please join me in our affirmation. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Now our story for all ages. Ashley is here. There she is. She's got a story for us. Ashley, I'm going to pass you this mic, okay? So you can be with the kids.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Rhodes. I am in charge of the children's programming at St. John's. But I have not been here in a while, so I think you guys are supposed to come up here. Does that sound right? No? They just sit there? Okay. That sounds actually the way we do it. Okay. So, the story that we have today is about moving and sometimes the things that help. It's called The Quilt Story by Tony Johnson and Tommy DePaula. So if you want to see the pictures, a little girl's mother made the quilt to keep her warm when the snow came down long ago. She stitched the quilt by a yellow flame, humming all the time. She stitched the tails of falling stars, and she stitched the name Abigail. Abigail loved the quilt. She wrapped it round her in the quiet dark and watched the winter skies. Sometimes she saw a falling star. Sometimes Abigail played in the woods near her home. Her dolls had tea, and the quilt had tea all over it. Sometimes she pretended the quilt was a gown. She wore it to town on her horse. Clop, 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 and it tore. So her mother stitched it up once more. Sometimes she played hide and seek with her sisters. She laughed and cried, "Don't peek," and hid under the quilt. And everyone found her. Sometimes Abigail was sick. She sneezed and sneezed. Then she slept under the quilt, and she felt better. One day, Abigail's family moved away across wide rivers and over a rock-hard trail. The quilt went too. Not stuffed in trunks with the blankets and clothes, it kept the little girls warm from the wild winds, warm from the rain, warm from the sparkling nights. They built a new house in the woods. Abigail's father built it with his hatchet. Chop, chop, chop. He built her a new bed. Chip, chip, chip. He made her a new horse, too. He worked until curly shavings covered the floor, and everyone sneezed and said, "Welcome home," and was glad. And Abigail felt sad. New house, new horse, new bed. Everything smelled of fresh chops and chips. Everything but the quilt. So her mother rocked her, as mothers do, then tucked her in, and Abigail felt at home again under the quilt. One day, when the quilt was very old and very loved, Abigail folded it carefully and put it in the attic. Everyone forgot it was there. A gray mouse came and loved the quilt. Her babies were born on top of it. They grew fat and gray in the warm stuffing. When they got hungry, they ate a falling star. A raccoon came and loved the quilt. She dug a hole in a corner with her black paws and hid an apple there. A cat came and loved the quilt, a patchwork cat. It rolled on the stars and stuffing spilled out like snow. Then the cat curled up in the snow and purred. Kitty, kitty, called a little girl. She found her cat and she found the quilt, splashed with patterns of sun. The little girl wrapped the quilt round her, and she loved it too. Can you make it like new? She asked her mother. So her mother patched the holes. She pushed fresh stuffing in. She stitched long tails on the stars to swish across the quilt again. One day, the little girl's family moved away across miles and miles of pavement and snaking gray highways. They found a new house, freshly cleaned, freshly waxed, freshly painted, white. They unpacked and unpacked all night. And everyone sneezed on cardboard dust and said, "Welcome home," and was glad. And the little girl felt sad. Everything smelled of white paint and boxes. Everything but the quilt. So her mother rocked her, as mothers do, then tucked her in, and she felt at home again, under the quilt. And there are the stars, you see? And that's the end.
Children. Now is the time in our service for joys and concerns. If you would like to express them via putting a stone in our bowl of water, you're welcome to come forward. The water represents love of community that amplifies our joys and comforts our sorrows. Anyone with a concern for which they would like follow-up is invited to write it on the back of your order of service, and please put it in the basket during collection or at the back of sanctuary.
please join me in the spirit of prayer, meditation. Today's meditation is called The Spirit of Community, and it's by Frederick Gillis. It is sort of a responsorial, so there's a section in there where you can respond if you feel so moved. It's number 501 in your hymnal. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring into our circle of concern all who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who are in pain, either in body or in spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. If you have somebody you'd like to remember, you can call their names out at this time if you'd like. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. We are grateful for the miracle of consciousness that we share, the consciousness that gives us the power to remember, to love, to care. At this time, we'll take up the offering. In today's offering, the plate collection supports St. John's sanctuary and immigration work. If you are using a check, please write it out to First Unitarian and put St. John's immigration work in the memo line. If you are making a pledge offering to St. John's or First Unitarian, please note that in the memo line. The offertory will be greatly received.
I know many at First Unitarian are dedicated to social justice in many avenues. In fact, I recognize many of you from the anti-racism course that we took in winter and spring. This reading today is a report from Sarah Lore Siebert, who is St. John's Sanctuary and Immigration Team Coordinator, and Charles Siebert, who is the team recorder. St. John's also has a commitment to racial justice. Among the humanitarian reasons that the sanctuary and immigration team was formed was to address the issues that would be arising in the 2016 election. About 200 people with the same reasoning from various faiths and congregations met at the Clifton Mosque in December of 2016. 12 came from St. John's. We knew that the years ahead were going to be very tense and confrontational, and as we all know, it was even worse than that. And worse for our immigrant friends, both documented and undocumented. They're enduring it still. Sarah felt strongly that we should have a group at St. John's, and she pressed for it. The group began meeting before it had approval to become a group and organized. The Sanctuary and Immigration Team, SIT, or SIT, officially became a St. John's team in April 2017. It was involved with the Immigrant Dignity Coalition, which formed about the same time, Amos, deportation and detention groups, and partnered with Clifton United Methodist Church to create a sanctuary. We gave money to them, we helped approve the space, and Sarah served on the steering committee for many years. Amy Monson from St. John's joined the sanctuary program and actively became our liaison to the Sanctuary Congregation's steering committee. For a while, Sarah was attending at least 2 meetings involving immigration justice each week. Of great importance were issues concerning the Justice Center, immigrant detainees in various jails, illegal questioning of anyone with a foreign name being reported to ICE immediately and then being questioned by ICE. Usually people were incarcerated or deported. St. John's has held food drives, clothing drives, and become tutors at the Willows, an apartment, well, it's an organization of 2 apartment complexes and related folks in the Springdale area, greater northern Cincinnati. Amy personally financed the painting and decorating of the sanctuary space at Clifton United Methodist. To welcome the second current family in that sanctuary space, Bridget Chu and I, with volunteers from other churches, helped scrub and paint parts of the kitchen to make it presentable to a new family. Our congregants volunteer for nearly anything that we ask them, says Sarah. Anjali Dutt became involved with Heartfelt Tidbits, got on the board, and then served as its president. She also launched research at the university where she teaches and is now involved with Cincinnati Compass. The University of Cincinnati, Cincinnati Compass is a collaborative project with University of Cincinnati, the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, and the City of Cincinnati, and more than 65 other partners. They all believe immigrants and refugees are key contributors to a strong regional economy and a diverse, vibrant community. Sarah mentions that I, Claire, and the liaison to the Willows Project from St. John's, we help distribute food to immigrant communities on Fridays. I help coordinate a small group of volunteers. I co-created and organized the Welcoming the Stranger presentation you will see today with our friend Linda Ford, who is at Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church, but also a member of St. John's. Sit. We've shared it with numerous churches. Linda did terrific outreach, although only a handful starting last year accepted our offer, and we wish to provide statistics and information about the needs of our immigrant friends. St. John's UU has also tutored ESL students in various organizations. Some of us are trained to screen applicants with MARC, the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition. We continue to be joined with many endeavors that our community of immigrant activists, and advocates have done and still do for immigrants from dozens of countries. At the February Global Stews event that we held, it was co-organized by Mary Newman, John Kachuba, and our friend Linda. There were 20 countries represented among 200 participants. That was fun. Another endeavor that St. John's enjoyed and encouraged for years was when one of our St. John's families, Jim and Catherine McDonough, took into their home a young female Afghan refugee, Zuhal, a Muslim. She attended St. John's with them often, and she became one of us. While Zuhal has grown and moved away, she is still a member of the McDonough family. Each member of the team works to make it what it is, Sarah feels we very much meet the spirit of a resolution outlined in the St. John's commitment to racial justice. As people from other organizations have told her, St. John's always shows up.
Please rise in body or spirit, and we'll sing hymn number 159, This Is My Song.
Pardon me, allergy break. There's water here if you want it. We have to turn this on. We are aware and sadly seeing over the last 501 days, Ukrainians being displaced and becoming refugees in other countries. In other regions, as you're aware, crime, violence, lack of work influence people to leave their homelands. May I have the first slide, please? Don Sherman and I will share information on immigrants and refugees in Greater Cincinnati. Don is co-founder and former director of the Cincinnati Interfaith Workers Center. There will be opportunities to talk with us and others afterward during coffee hour. Here in Greater Cincinnati, we have refugees and recent immigrants from numerous countries. Several years ago, as mentioned in the reading, about a dozen congregations started the sanctuary congregation movement, with churches and temples as solidarity congregations as well. No surprise, COVID slowed down volunteering. We hope to rekindle the compassion and passion for helping refugees and immigrants in our area. We are going to share a lot of numbers. Some may sound confusing. Our slideshow is available online, so you can review it later. We'll make sure you've got that. The census shows an increase of 40,000 Hispanics, that's the census term, from 2010 to 2020 in Greater Cincinnati to reach a population of 95,000 Hispanic people living in Greater Cincinnati. But that only represents one region of the world, right? From CincinnatiCompass.com, Metro Cincinnati growth includes migrants from West Africa, Mali, and Burkina Faso in Westwood, Guatemalans in East Price Hill and Covington, and as we know, in Springdale, Bhutanese and Congolese in Mount Airy and Boone County, Ethiopians and Somalians in Florence, and Burundians in North Fairmount. In fact, you can look up the different communities around Greater Cincinnati to see growth over the years.
Hi, many of you I know and really have a great feeling for being back here at First. And I cannot see that slide, but I can read it here. So I'm still a lawyer in some sense, so I do a lot of pro bono work with DACA students or DACA recipients, because you can only renew DACA. You can't get it for the first time. There was a decision a couple years ago by a judge in Texas that basically said, even if you arrive before 2007, you can't get DACA unless you had applied before. So a lot of people that I know, their mothers and fathers, want to see their children who are graduating from high school be able to work legally. They can't. So as you see from the slide, I guess it's in the back, or that's not available? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go over this, but as Claire said, we're going to be at the reception afterwards, and we'd love to talk to you and answer your questions, because we have so many things to talk about. Everybody knows what a citizen is. You probably all are citizens. Maybe not. We have one exception, I know. Temporary visitors, such as students, tourists, and we have a lot of students who are on student visas in the United States and in Cincinnati as well. H-2A and H-2B are employment visas, and we also have a lot of immigrants who are filling those positions here. Lawful permanent residence is basically to a point where you're given status and you can become a citizen either after 3 to 5 years, depending on your situation. But you have to take the test that many of us probably couldn't pass, but immigrants can after studying. So refugees, we have a number of refugees that have come through, now we have Catholic Charities who basically run the refugee program. A couple years ago, when we had another president, I don't know if you remember that we had a president before Biden, we went down to 15,000 refugees for the entire country. We're up to about 125,000, and I think around 800 are now coming to Cincinnati through Catholic Charities. They can be from places like Bhutan, Burundi, and many other places where UN has basically helped them survive in a refugee situation. There's others, but I wanted to talk really briefly about special immigrant juvenile status. We have in Hamilton County around 500, 600 unaccompanied minors who have crossed the border in the last couple of years who are under 18 that we can, working with a custodial recipient, obtain status for them. They have to go to school. If they're unaccompanied, and we go through a process of going to family court with a custodial person and getting an order, a predicate order, so that we can use it with USCIS to get immigration status for these children. If we don't, we have 500 or so who are going to be graduating from high school that have no status, are going to be exploited as much as many other immigrants are without documentation by employers. Humanitarian parole, we have a number of those immigrants coming across the border who, through the U.S. government, they've been able to get what's called humanitarian parole. That means they're paroled into the United States so they can immediately, or after we work with them, they can get work status. They can get permission to work. So we have a lot of Nicaraguans and Venezuelans coming into our community. The problem that I see, and this is, I hope it's not controversial, is that we have sanctions on both countries. So those sanctions are driving people. When I talk to the Venezuelans and Nicaraguans who have come here under humanitarian parole, I really can't get enough for them to say, yeah, I can apply for asylum. They can't. You can't say that I'm poor, I have no food, and I'm bringing my family because we're desperate. And the Venezuelans, and I just visited a family yesterday, I hope I'm not taking too much time.
You know the stuff, man.
I visited a Venezuelan family that came in April. 3 kids, 3 very small children, 6, 7, and 5. They lived in a basement right now with water on the floor. They have no place to sleep. But they were so poor, they felt they had to come to the United States. And I don't know if people have heard the Darien Gap, which is a place between Colombia and the majority of Panama. It's a jungle. And people take advantage of these immigrants. I know the family told me when they came up, they saw all these snakes. They were so afraid because they were so close to getting, bit or whatever. And they had to come through that jungle. They came here, and the problem, as I just mentioned, we have sanctions. We're pushing people out of Venezuela, Nicaragua, those are the 2 countries that have humanitarian parole, into the United States, and they're being, confronted by situations of vigilantes and governors from different states that are trying to make an issue of immigrants coming here. I really hope we can move to change that situation. Asylum, it's really difficult to get in our region. Cleveland is the court here, immigration court. We have probably about 90% failure rate after we try to file for asylum. And so many people are in a situation where they either are deported or they go underground. So we know many, many people that have to go underground. They don't have documents. They work for exploitive employers. I shouldn't go on and on about this because we have so much to go through.
More later, right? Big picture, how many of these folks are in the U.S.? A 2019 Pew Research report says more than 40 million in the U.S. were born in another country, which accounts for about 1/5 of the world's migrants and represents almost every country in the world. That's a nearly triple amount, percentage-wise, from 1970. And as you might suspect, most are here legally. About 1/4 are unauthorized. Interestingly, in 2019, Pew said 52% had become naturalized U.S. citizens. Pew also says, by race and ethnicity, more Asian immigrants than Hispanic immigrants have arrived in the U.S. in most years since 2009. And yet we all read the news, right? Where is our attention? Below our southern border for the most part. To Cincinnati. Well, Linda and I and others went to so many sources trying to figure out what percentage or what numbers are here in Greater Cincinnati. The best we can do is good estimates. 5 to 10% truly covers it. We think it's in the 6 to 8% range of being immigrants and refugees from all nationalities. A recent report at UC said from 2010 to 20, the Hispanic population here grew 48.5% to more than 73,000 Hispanics in our community. But census said it was 95,000 Hispanic folks in the area. Interestingly, those things that fear some folks, some other folks, it adds up to 48.6% of people in the city estimated to be white and non-Hispanic, right? Less than half. As far as growth of population in our areas, NKU did a study that said, in the recent decade, the increase of growth of population in the area was, let me see, I have to start this again, sorry. The recent decade increase was around 30% of the growth of population, 77% of positive migrations to the northern Kentucky region over 10 years was due to immigrants. Another source, newamericaneconomy.org, said Cincinnati had the highest ratio of growth from immigrants in a metro area. They gave us 98% over a 3-year span, 2014 to 2017, attributable to immigrants. I couldn't find that anywhere else. It seems so high. You know, again, that's percentage of growth, but that was among our resources. As Don mentioned, Catholic Charities of Southwest Ohio pretty much leads in refugee resettlement here. This slide is from a March of this year report showing that Bhutan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Syria are among the largest areas represented in the folks that they are resettling. You may wonder where Ukrainians show, but the term that Don used earlier, humanitarian parolee, is the program under which Ukrainians are coming to the United States.
So, Claire gave you a sense we have many thousands of immigrants who are undocumented here. Some are waiting for asylum hearings, or others have crossed the border with what's called without inspection, not going through the regular channels. So where do they work? Most of the people that we work with, and I work mainly with immigrants from Guatemala. They're indigenous immigrants. They're from the Mayan areas of Guatemala, which represent around 40 or more percent of Guatemala. They've been discriminated against for 500 years in Guatemala. So they come here out of desperation, and many of them work on construction, cleaning homes, in the areas like food production. It's always under the table. It's people employers who don't really want to know the status of their workers, but they need to actually have workers employed in some of the industries that are really difficult and dangerous. So many years ago, in 2007, which is many years ago, I worked on a situation where there was a raid by ICE at Cook Foods. Cook Foods is still operating. It's a huge enterprise that provides packaged food to the stores here. I was called in with other people from different organizations by ICE because they were going to tell us what they were doing. They had raided this factory. 160 people were detained. We got wind that the supervisor said to the second shift, because it was the first and third shifts, don't worry, we've already worked with the police, the county sheriff's office, and ICE, that they're not going to do anything with the second shift. This is just a show. But 160 people were detained. 60 of them were from Peru, and many of the people that I met in jail who were in Butler County Jail from Peru, were talking about, I'm a CPA. I came to visit on a tourist visa, but I made more money at Cooked Foods than I could make in Peru. So it's our situation. We have many thousands of workers who are undocumented that have to survive. They can't get licenses, but somehow they're surviving by working more dangerous jobs, jobs that doesn't employ in terms of wages as they would with U.S. workers.
Oh, yeah, kids. Oops.
So this slide, if people can see it, it's basically giving a breakdown in our area where those children are going to school. Princeton, Academy of Languages, Roberts, and really every school district in the area, you'll have undocumented immigrant children. The thing about most of the people that I work with, well, and as I indicated, it's mostly Guatemalan refugees or immigrants. Most of them had to quit school when they were 10 or 11 years old. They don't know the value of school. They expect their children to work as well. So we have many children who are working and trying to go to school, which is kind of impossible, doing hard jobs wherever they're working at 12, 13, 14 years old. And we really encourage, and I know Claire mentioned, we're trying to get tutors, and we're trying to work with the parents to understand the value of getting these children through high school. But a lot of them do work, and they see the real sense of their work, they can send it to their families in Guatemala, Honduras, wherever. So people are going to school, and we're really encouraging, and we have really good ESL teachers, but it is a real situation to get them to continue in school. So we're talking about where the immigrants are coming in. We've mentioned Guatemala, Central America, less so in Mexicans. It used to be, when I first became the director of the Workers Center, we worked with a lot of Mexicans who arrived in the 90s, and a lot of that had to do with NAFTA, I believe, but we won't go into that. We're getting a large influx of West Africans. The Mauritanians, we just had a meeting with 500 Mauritanians in Cincinnati area, just talking about how they came in, all of them, and the Senegalese. That's another large population. We probably have 3,000 to 5,000 Senegalese here in the United States. They're able to come to the United States through a visa. They don't have to have a passport. In Ecuador and Brazil, you can fly from Senegal or other places in West Africa without a visa. You come in, and then you go through that whole situation of coming up, walking, working sometimes, but making it to the United States, which is their dream, which sometimes can become a nightmare for some families. So I know I'm working now with a woman from Senegal who flew with her 2-year-old child to Ecuador, walked, had odd jobs throughout her walk from Ecuador to the United States. It took 6 months. She now speaks Spanish. But the reason she came is that the community where she lived in Senegal was going to do female mutilation on her 2-year-old. And she didn't want that to happen. She gathered enough money to get on a plane and come here through that arduous 6-month journey to the United States. We're trying to work to see if she can get asylum here. And I asked the president of the Senegalese community who I work with, well, why are they coming to the United States? Senegal was a colony of France. Too many people are dying in the Mediterranean trying to get into the United States.
Oh, I've got you on here too, because you're one of our agencies.
Okay.
You can be brief.
I'll be really brief with the agencies. You can see behind me, and I can't see up there, that these are the different groups that are working with immigrants throughout our community. Catholic Charities is Sukasa Hispanic Center, Heartfelt Tidbits, which works with both refugees and immigrants. 3R Fund, which I belong to, we try to raise money for legal help. The problem with most immigrants for asylum, it costs anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000 just to get a lawyer to help you apply. And the other groups, St. Vincent de Paul, who I work with as well, can supply things like beds and other necessities for some of the immigrants. So now I'd like to present our speaker, and I have the real pleasure of knowing Mariam Farid for the last 6 or 7 years. She's from Afghanistan. She can tell her story, but she was a doctor in Afghanistan, and she had real reasons to leave. Mariam?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure. My name is Miriam. I am from Afghanistan. I would like to share a little bit about myself, how I ended up in the US, and my goal for being here today is to tell you why we need to help. And it is not only a humanitarian responsibility, but once you're an American citizen, now I'm an American citizen, I'm grateful. As an American citizen, I feel responsible to help other immigrants. And being an American as default puts you in a place of accountability and responsibility to help immigrants. Let's talk about that reason first, then I'll tell you about myself a little bit. Excuse me. When I did some research about America's foreign policy, it was very hard not to find a connection between a foreign policy of empowered countries such as America or any other countries in the West with the misery that the third world country is facing. It's very hard not to find the connection between the foreign policy of the West and the misery of third world countries. And we pay taxes. We have chosen to live in this country. We like it or not, the foreign policy of the place that we are living and we are calling a country now is affecting the rest of the world. That makes us responsible to help. And unfortunately, we cannot depend on the government to help us or to help other immigrants. I have been in the United States for 7 years now. I have not received $1 of aid from the US government, including Medicaid or food stamps. But I'm still here, I'm flourishing, and I have a great life. So how did it happen? I was 23 years old when I graduated medical school back in Afghanistan. I was the youngest doctor in that year of graduation. But I could never practice because I was supposed to get married. And the person who I was married to, who I was supposed to get married to, decided that I should not work. That's how my medical career in Afghanistan ended. And I was put in a situation where I had to choose between leaving by myself or dying. I faced a situation called honor killing in Afghanistan. That happens to a woman if she goes against the culture or the family rules. And I did that because I said no. I said no to an engagement that was not something that I believed in. I did not want to be a submissive woman who's going to get sacrificed for the rule of a family, which is not in any book. It is just a culture. It's just misogyny. I said no to that for my family and the community that I was living in. That was a decision that I have destroyed the honor of two families, my own family and the family of the opposite person. So they decided that, okay, I'm eligible for honor killing. And when such a thing as honor killing happens in Afghanistan, the police, the justice system looks the other way. They call it a family matter. So I didn't have anywhere else to go. And then in my family, I had a big family, all girls, only my father. My father couldn't protect me either. So I had to just get out of Afghanistan. I had to decide that my life is worth enough for me to offend my family, leave my culture, go somewhere that I do not know anybody, because that was my only choice. And I did not know the language either. The first time that I spoke English was in the US Embassy for my visa interview. I still had to do that because I had to believe that my life is worth something and I'm going to do something one day that is going to make a positive change in this world. So I am going to live, I'm going to survive, and I had to do that alone. I arrived in the US when I was 24, like many other immigrants, with a suitcase of clothes and a little bit of money. And I didn't know what to do, so I lived on Airbnb, and that money was gone in a matter of a week. After that, I didn't have a place to go, I didn't have a work permit, I didn't speak the language well, and I didn't know anybody. But still, fast forward 7 years later, I have a really good life, so how did it happen? And the government didn't help me. How did it happen? It's all because of the kindness of strangers. People didn't know me, but they believed that if they help me, they are going to make a positive change in the world and in my life, and they were right. The first person who helped me was my mentor, who took me in, and I lived with him for 3 months down in Northern Virginia until we decided that I have to move in a city where it's more affordable, that I could live and make a new life, which was Cincinnati. When I moved to Cincinnati, another family took me in, and I lived in their house for 1 year and 8 months. Imagine having a person, an adult, for 1 year and 8 months, feeding her and providing everything that she needs. That was a great sacrifice that the family made for me, and I could never be grateful enough to them. And there were other people who came on my way and helped me. The help was even somebody will come and take me out to get ice cream because I was very isolated and lonely. The family was busy with their own kids, which was understandable, and they didn't have time to entertain me. And there were times that somebody will just give me a ride to my doctor's appointment, or somebody will give me a ride to the federal building where I had to do my interviews. And I'm glad to say that I didn't pay anything for any legal fees when I was going through asylum process. And of course, I needed a lot of legal help, and Don was always there. He will come and take me to the federal building, he will file papers, and then I had all these other people that just showed up and helped me, as small as an ice cream, a cup of coffee, and talking with me or taking me to an appointment, or as big as having me in their house for 1 year and 8 months. I believe that if they had not helped me, I would have not been here today. So when it's the matter of helping people, it doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be something big. You could just do whatever you could. Just go for a walk with somebody, and that could change somebody's life drastically. And I'm a proof of that. It is not like one person did everything for me. There were a group of people, they did whatever they could. And the reason that it's very important to know why people leave their home and why people end up in the US. Am I lucky that I landed in the US? I don't think that was luck. If I was lucky, I would have been born an upper-class Caucasian woman. Then I would have been really lucky, right? I don't consider myself lucky because I came to the US. I'm immensely grateful that I was in the US, or I am here, because of the people. Not because it is the United States, the most powerful country in the world, because of the people. I think if I was in another place, I don't think people would have been as generous as they are here. And that is what I am leaning on, and that's what makes me feel so grateful to be here. And if I was lucky, my country would have not been in pieces. My homeland would have not been in pieces today. So no, I'm not lucky that I had to leave. But yeah, I was lucky that I ran into people whose baseline of ideology is not discrimination, who sees other humans like they see themselves. They didn't look down on me. They believed in me that if I get a little bit of help, I could make a good life for myself. And they were right. And the reason that I left Afghanistan, I never wanted to leave Afghanistan. I never wanted to leave my family. I was raised in a really sheltered, close family, and we were always together. We were 7 sisters, and we always were together. Leaving that group of 7 sisters was the hardest thing to do. But I had to. And if I had not believed in myself that my life was worth it, my family would have been dead today also. Because back in 2021, Afghanistan fell to Taliban, right? So the intense culture that I faced got 10 times worse for other women, and I had 3 single sisters, and my mom, who was a human rights activist. So I had to evacuate them and bring them here too. And the reason that I left, I had to save my life. And the reason that they left, they had to save their lives. And also, my sisters would have not been killed immediately, but they would have been taken against their will by Taliban because they just wanted to have virgin young girls. That was their ideology. And my father, at that point, he was really old and he couldn't protect them. Even though if he was not old, how do you protect your girls under a gun if somebody's holding a gun on your head, right? My family had to leave because their home was taken over. When Taliban came, they started to go in hiding. The Taliban, they broke into our house. They just took everything that was there, destroyed everything that was there, destroyed all of our memories. I don't have a picture of my childhood anymore. My parents, they do not have a picture of their wedding day anymore because they had to leave everything behind and everything was taken over. Their house was taken over, and now some random person who is affiliated with Taliban live in their house with no documents, with no papers, with no rent. They just live there because they can. That was the reason that my family had to leave. And the other part about immigration that you need to know about is that war, immigration, being a refugee, it dismantles the family foundation. It's not only the hardship that we face leaving or coming to a different country, it's the hardship that we face in our own family. When I had to leave, my own family was not happy with me, so I lost the support of my parents. If they didn't want to talk with me, they would have not talked with me. That was another cause of my isolation in the US. And then in 2021, when I managed to evacuate all of my family members, when my mom came here and saw me, she was shocked because I was a part of the cultural shock for her. When I left Afghanistan, I was totally covered. You could have not seen my hair. The only body part that you could have seen was my face and my hands because I had to be like that to be safe, to adjust in the society no matter what I believed. When she came here and saw me and I'm holding a glass of wine with dinner and I'm like dressed like this and she's like, "Who are you? Get away from me, get away from my daughters. I do not want them to turn into you immediately. How do I do this?" So now it is very hard for my mom to accept me. And I have to deal with the reality that I stayed away from my family for 7 years. I paused my life for 6 months in 2021 to evacuate them and bring them here. And now my own mother cannot accept me, and I have to stay from my own sisters that I missed dearly, and I have to respect her wishes. I didn't have to be in this position if Afghanistan was safe. If I had any other option than immigration, I would have not chosen to turn my back to my family to survive, right? And the other part that you need to know about immigration system in the US is that if you are a refugee, you will get some help from the US government. If you're an immigrant of any other situation, specifically an asylum seeker, based on my experience, the US government will just process your papers. Otherwise, you're on your own. They do not care what happens to you. If you have a refugee status, you might come in with some papers. You might have 90 days of help until you get a place, you get a job. But if you're an immigrant, I came with a visit visa. I was not eligible to even apply for help. And US government did not care about me. And every time that I had to apply for asylum, for a status, for anything, I had to include a check inside that application. If I go for a biometric, I have to include a check. And then once you do a biometric, sometimes they don't need a second biometric, but you still have to apply for that, make a schedule and include a check. Then I get this letter that, well, your first biometric will count for all your process, but your check is not refundable. You don't have to come for biometrics, your check is not refundable. For a person who doesn't have anything, including a check in every application to save your life, it is close to impossible if there's no help from people like you. And the other option is we go back. If I go back to Afghanistan today, I cannot make it out of the airplane. The moment that I sit in an airplane, maybe even in Dubai airport, and I'm headed to Afghanistan, somebody could kill me inside the airplane and nobody will say anything because I lived in the US and I left Afghanistan for the US. Immigrants end up in the US because they do not have any other option. The other option could be death. It's either slow death with poverty or it is an actual death, like me. If I go back to Afghanistan, I'll get shot immediately or my family members. And the hardships that immigrants go through, it is so exhausting that the moment that you get to a safe place, the only wish that you have is to just sleep and sleep and sleep. Do not wake up, do not talk with anybody, and you wake up one day and everything is fine. But that never happens. The hardships that I had to go through, I had to live with a family for 1 year and 8 months. That was not easy. The culture was different. Whatever I did that I thought was good, respectful in my culture, it would have come off to them as rude, and they would have been so frustrated with me and tell me like, oh madam, you're so rude. How could you say that? And I'm like, oh, what did I say? They're like, you said this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. Then I had to explain myself for another 5 minutes and cry and like apologize. It was very hard. I'm grateful they had me. It was very hard on them. It was very hard on me. And when my family made their way here, my father was very sick and he had a minor stroke back in Afghanistan when Taliban came. They had to go to Albania, stay in a refugee camp. He got more sick there, but he didn't have enough medical care. He had heart failure, but the doctors thought it was COVID. So they quarantined my father, didn't let anybody to see them. And my father passed in the hospital, away from us with a wrong diagnosis. And when his situation got really worse, they just sent him to cardiac ICU from COVID ICU, and nobody told me here on the phone or my family back in the refugee camp. For the longest time, my father was missing. We searched for him for 2 days because the hospital told us that, well, we released this patient. We looked for my father in Albania, and I'm managing to call somebody in Albania, police or whatever, from the US to see where my father is. We finally found my father in the morgue. So my mom and my sisters had to have a small funeral in the refugee camp for my father, bury my father in Albania, and come here without him. We don't know anybody in Albania. We didn't know that my family would end up in Albania. Now my father is buried in Albania. And if we have to go to see him, my mom, in order for her to go and visit her husband's grave, she has to wait for 6 or 7 years until she has a passport. to go to Albania. The only person who could visit my father is me. And that's it. And we are a big family of other 8 people. The way that my father passed, the pain that my mom and my sister went through, and they still came here, they did not have refugee status. They came here with a student and work visas. The US government did not help them because they did not have refugee status. Everything that they have today is all by the help of strangers around them. Right now, 2 of my sisters are studying in Rutgers University. One is in high school, and my mom has a job. She's comfortable enough to take care of herself and my sisters, and I still feel good that she's able to provide for her daughters and not push them to work so they could have time to study. All of this, all of the good changes that has happened in our life, all the support that we had surviving and coming from Afghanistan were by the kindness of strangers, people that we never knew, and now they're our friends. We call them our families. And they have changed our life for the better to the point where we could make a positive change in the US and in the world. And that change that we are making is not ours only. Whenever I do something positive, I mention all those people who helped me, because whenever I wanted to thank them and I wanted to say, like, what could I do? You're doing so much for me, what could I do? They say, don't try to pay it back, pay it forward. So whenever I'm able to pay something forward, I always mention them. It's because of them. It's not my accomplishment only, it's theirs too. And it is our humanitarian responsibility, and it's our responsibility as American citizens that we have to help people who end up in the US as immigrants or refugees, asylum seekers, whatever their status is, because we like it or not, somehow our country is responsible for 1 or 2 things that happen to them. And it is our humanitarian responsibility to help each other. I would like to thank you for giving me the time and listening to me, and I'm very glad to be able to come here and share my story. Thank you.
Mariam, thank you for your bravery and for sharing with us. It's a beautiful story. I think I need to go back to a couple slides. That one? Can you back? Oh, let me go back up too. There it is. Don and Mariam have shared some of the needs of legal help for refugees. When we mentioned the Willows Project before, many organizations donate food that used to go to waste, like Last Mile Food Rescue is among the places we get food. Those of us who go to volunteer really just help organize. It's just giving 2 hours a week, so simple. But stability is the category that covers housing, emergency costs, clothes, and food. Please think in that category if you think there's something you can do to support some of our friends. It can be done congregationally or individually. Some of the agencies, Don mentioned some before, they just would love to have some other people on their boards for other input and awareness. And I'm sure many of you have been on boards. You get to share with the people you come across, and then we grow the communities that might be available for support. A very simple thing, Paul Breitenbach and Don are among our 2 primary Willows coordinators, and Paul has organized meetups in Springdale to help kids and grown-ups an hour. I think he's doing like 4 different hours a week just to talk English with somebody. You don't have to know Spanish. We can connect you to Paul if you think you can do that. It doesn't have to be every week, but once in a while. I can give you the schedule. Linda made us aware of something just yesterday. The Immigrant Solidarity Program aims to bear witness to the experience of immigrants in detention by initiating personal connections and providing support and companionship. The program's first action is to establish pen pal email correspondence with those being detained in the Boone County Jail. We will use the jail's internal email exchange system. You will not be using your personal email account. There are about 90 current immigrant detainees housed in that jail. If you are interested in participating in that level of support, you can contact Samantha at IJPC, Interfaith Justice and Peace Center, or Linda Ford. Linda, raise your hand. Thank you. These are some of the groups we mentioned today and the contact information. In the bottom right, 3R Fund, Don mentioned. Legal help costs. There are some of your friends and you who do it pro bono, but others who rightfully need to be paid for their time. So 3R Fund tries to fund some attorney time and legal assistance for refugees. I mentioned IJPC. They organize the Immigrant Dignity Coalition. St. John's is a member. There are 19 member organizations of IDC and 24 supporter organizations. Thank you so much for your attention and interest today, especially again to Mariam.
Final hymn will be 305, De Calores, and we will sing all the verses. Please rise and embody your spirit.
As Claire extinguishes the chalice, I'd like to leave you with these words of benediction. No matter how weak or how frightened we may feel, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. In this coming week, may you do at least one thing to support the broken, to welcome the stranger, to celebrate what is worthy, to do the work of justice and love. Be strong, be connected. Each day, act so you may be a little more whole.